They told me the wedding was just close friends. But somehow my card covered the bar tab, the cake, and $4,100 in floral arrangements. I didn't make a scene. I contacted the planner, flagged the card, and had my name removed from all contracts. 2 hours before the ceremony, the flowers vanished and the bartender left. My dad texted, "Fix this. They're blaming us." I muted the chat. Then my dad called 23 times in a row. I wasn't invited to my own brother's wedding. No surprise there. When my mom said it was going to be just for close friends, I didn't even flinch. We were sitting in her kitchen and she said it like she was reading off a grocery list, like I was being spared from something I wouldn't care about. I nodded, kept drinking my coffee, and acted like I didn't notice the way she avoided eye contact. I didn't ask who was invited, but I knew family from her side, family from Dad's, a few people who had shown up for every holiday gathering since I was a kid. You know, the ones they still called aunts and uncles, even though they weren't related to us by blood or marriage. Basically, everyone but me. Still, I stayed quiet. No one needed to know I had just added $6,000 to our old joint family account a week earlier. I had sold off a bunch of equipment from a freelance project, stuff I didn't need anymore, and the cash was supposed to hang there for a few days until I shifted it to my personal account. I left it because I still had some weird attachment to the idea that we could share things without anyone screwing me over. That was my mistake. 3 days before the wedding, I started getting credit card notifications. At first, I thought it was fraud, a $2,300 charge at a bakery. Then $1,800 at a high-end floral boutique. Another for bar services. I called the card company. The woman on the line confirmed that all the charges were made under an event package and someone had used my information tied to a family planner account. When I asked who, she read the name slowly, Marshall Grant, my mom. I didn't even blink. Just asked for everything pending under that profile and told her to cancel it all. The vendor contract still had my name as financial guarantor. I called the wedding organizer, explained the situation plainly, and revoked every one of them. I didn't yell. I didn't accuse anyone. I just wiped my name off like it was never there. 2 hours before the ceremony, my phone buzzed with 2 separate vendor alerts. First, the message, "Bartender has left location. No backup available. Client unreachable." Then floral delivery canceled. Payment method declined. My phone lit up a minute later. A message from my dad fixed this. "They're blaming us." I turned off notifications without replying. Then came the calls. He called 23 times in under 40 minutes. No voicemails. Just the same name lighting up my screen like it was some kind of emergency. I watched it buzz across the table while I finished my dinner. I didn't answer until the last call. I said, "What?" He went quiet for a second, probably surprised I picked up. Then he said, "Your mother's in tears. Your brother is humiliated. You think this is funny?" I said, "I think it's appropriate." He said, "You fix this or you're not family." I hung up, blocked the number. Then I left the phone in another room. The wedding still happened. They scrambled, begged, and patched together something last minute. I saw a few pictures float across mutual friends' stories. The cake was a basic sheet cake from a grocery store. The reception was held in someone's backyard. There were beer cans and plastic cups. They never mentioned my name in public. Not once. They played it cool like everything had been planned that way. But the text started again the next morning from different numbers. I ignored all of them. I didn't know it yet, but that was just the start. The real fallout came fast. Not because I pulled the plug on their dream wedding, but because they assumed I wouldn't fight back and because they weren't finished trying to use me. The morning after the wedding, I got a Venmo request from my brother for $1,100 labeled "wedding stuff your part." I stared at it for a few seconds like maybe if I looked long enough, I'd understand what part of his brain thought that was a normal thing to do. I didn't decline it. I didn't reply. I just screenshotted it and archived it in a folder labeled attempts. By noon, I'd gotten 3 texts from my mom, all different tones, one emotional, one cold, one passive-aggressive. I didn't respond. Then a 4th message came from my aunt, saying I was tearing the family apart. That one made me laugh a little. I hadn't even been part of the family, according to them, just 3 days ago. I thought that would be it for a while, that they'd lick their wounds, maybe go silent, maybe pretend I didn't exist for another few months. But then things got weird. On Monday, I logged into our family share drive, something we used years ago to keep paperwork and documents when we were helping Dad through a medical thing, and saw a new folder labeled Lucas's obligations. Inside were PDFs, scans of receipts from the wedding, screenshots of text messages between my mom and vendors, and a type-out document with the title agreements and understandings, Family Support 2020 to 2025. They had backdated it. It was formatted like a legal agreement, full of vague statements about shared responsibility and family-funded events with my name added into lines that sounded like I had signed off on everything. I hadn't. None of the signature fields were filled. It looked like something whipped together by someone who had only ever watched court dramas. I called a lawyer I knew from a freelance gig and asked them to take a quick look. They laughed and said it was useless but weird, they added. And not something you ignore. Save everything. So I did. I backed it all up. Texts, emails, screenshots, even the Venmo request. And then, because I wanted to be very clear, I sent one message to the family group chat. Do not contact me again unless it's through a legal representative. Everything else will be documented. Left it at that. 3 days later, I got a call from my work's HR. Someone had submitted an anonymous report claiming I was under investigation for financial misconduct outside the company. They said it didn't affect my employment, but they were required to check. It wasn't a stretch to guess who had done it. What they didn't realize was that I had just been promoted, that the company knew me, and that their little stunt had just opened a new door for me, one that let me start pulling threads that they had left hanging for years. See, they thought this was about a wedding, but I'd been quiet for a long time. Too long. A week passed. No texts, no calls, just silence. But silence from my family never meant peace. It meant planning. Then the letter started. First one came in a white envelope with no return address. Just my name typed. Inside was a printed statement, not even handwritten, accusing me of dereliction of family duty, whatever that meant. It was signed the family, like I was getting warnings from a cult. I folded it up and slid it into the same attempts folder. Then one of my cousins messaged me from a new account saying, "They're putting together a statement to send to your work." I asked who they were. She didn't answer, just said, "You didn't hear it from me," which was code for I'm part of it, but don't want to burn the bridge. It wasn't hard to piece it together. My parents had convinced a few relatives that I had committed some kind of betrayal by pulling my financial support. Like I was responsible for their budget collapse because I stopped letting them spend my money without asking. They tried to play it subtle, posting cryptic things on Facebook. Like some people only want to be around when they're needed and you raised them, you fed them, and still they betray you. The usual martyr stuff. What they didn't know was that I had started talking to my brother's ex. Her name was Valerie. They had dated for 3 years and my family hated her for reasons that never made sense. She'd reached out after the wedding photos surfaced. Said she was sorry I had been treated like a stranger. I figured she was being polite, but then she mentioned something about an account. What account? I asked. She told me my brother had once bragged that their emergency wedding fund had gotten a boost from Lucas's little nest egg. I asked her when this happened. She said February. That was 2 months before I added the $6,000 to the joint account, which meant they had known they were going to use my money before they told me I wasn't invited. They had probably planned it that way from the start. Use the cash, blame logistics, keep the party clean. Now it was revenge. So I started pulling everything. Every cent I had ever loaned, transferred, or contributed over the years. Family vacations I paid for. My dad's overdue taxes I helped clear. My mom's car registration fines. I made a spreadsheet and attached receipts. It was a slow burn. I wasn't going to demand repayment. I wasn't even going to send it to them. I was going to show it to someone else because buried in the middle of all that was a detail I had forgotten. I had once transferred $8,000 directly into my parents' joint savings account 2 years ago to help them avoid foreclosure. My name wasn't on the house, but the transfer had been made with a written understanding that they'd signed partial ownership if the mortgage cleared. They never did. And now they were about to need a lawyer. But I was patient. I didn't fire back right away. I let them post, let them message, let them scramble. Then one of them made a mistake. They sent a family-wide email accusing me of trying to sabotage my brother's marriage and threatening to remove me from the will permanently. That email went to one of my coworkers by accident. Her name is also Lucas, short for Lucinda. She forwarded it to me, and I knew the quiet part of this war was over. Once Lucinda forwarded me that email, everything shifted. It wasn't just petty anymore. It was public. The line had been crossed. So I replied to the email thread. Not emotionally, just with a screenshot showing they had sent it to the wrong person. I added one sentence. You might want to be more careful. Then I did nothing else for 2 days. They stayed quiet after that. I think they realized they messed up, but they didn't know how badly. I didn't hear anything until Saturday night when I got a call from Valerie again. This time she didn't bother with pleasantries. She told me my parents had filed something in small claims court. They're trying to sue you, she said, for damages to the wedding. I honestly laughed. They were suing me for canceling services I paid for an event I wasn't invited to. The paperwork hadn't arrived yet, but I knew it was coming. What they didn't know was that I had already gone further. I had spoken to a real attorney. I wasn't just playing defense anymore. By Monday morning, I had a formal letter sent to my parents from my lawyer. It detailed everything. The unauthorized use of funds, the false documents, the harassment, and the misuse of my name on financial contracts, but it also included something else. The property transfer agreement. My lawyer asked for the original $8,000 to be returned immediately or for a partial title adjustment to reflect the agreed support. No threats, just legal clarity. She gave them 2 weeks. That's when everything exploded. First, my cousin Amy went on Facebook and made a long post about entitled children who think helping their parents makes them landlords. Then, my uncle posted a meme about narcissists pretending to be victims. I didn't reply to any of it. Neither did Valerie, though. She kept sending me screenshots like we were building a scrapbook. Then, something unexpected happened. I got a text from my brother. It just said I didn't know about the $8,000. They told me it was a gift from Mom's savings. I'm sorry. I didn't reply. Not because I didn't believe him, but because it didn't change anything. He had let them use me. Whether he knew the numbers or not, he knew I wasn't invited and didn't say a word. That kind of silence doesn't go away with one text. The lawsuit never made it to court. My lawyer filed a preemptive notice that spooked them into backing down. A week later, I got a message from an unknown number. My mom. Tell your lawyer to drop this. We're family. I blocked it. The last time I saw my family together was in a tagged photo from a birthday party for a distant cousin. They all looked tired. My dad wasn't there. I found out later he moved into a motel after a fight with my mom about money. My brother and his new wife were living with her parents now. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. But I kept every screenshot. And I wasn't done yet. I hadn't heard anything for about a month. No emails, no texts, no new charges or threats. For a second, I thought maybe it was over. Not forgiven, just exhausted. Like they burned themselves out trying to spin the story and finally gave up. But then something strange happened. I went to withdraw money from one of my old bank accounts and saw it had been frozen. Not empty, frozen. It was a shared account I'd forgotten about. One I used years ago when I was helping my dad with his small landscaping business. I had left a couple thousand in there, completely off my radar until that day. I called the bank. They told me there had been a flagged attempt to transfer the full balance to a new business entity, an LLC I'd never heard of. The account had been frozen due to a mismatch in the authorization signature. The rep asked if I knew someone named Craig Barrett. I didn't, but I Googled the name. It was the name of my father's longtime friend, a guy who had done odd jobs with him on and off. I found an LLC registered under Craig's name filed less than 2 weeks earlier. The business name, Grant Family Enterprises, my last name. I dug deeper. The LLC used my dad's home address and the application listed a financial cosigner email. It was mine, not an actual business email, but a fake one. My name with a number added hosted on some throwaway domain. It looked just real enough to pass unless someone checked. I brought it to my lawyer. She got very quiet. The forgery wasn't just amateur. It was criminal. We filed a fraud report and submitted a request to subpoena the records. Meanwhile, I checked with other financial institutions I'd had connections to just in case. That's when I found another gem. My dad had tried to co-sign a loan using an old investment account I had partially funded years ago. The loan hadn't gone through. He was denied, but the attempt was on record. He'd used a fake email for that too, this time with my full name. Now, I understood the sudden silence. They hadn't gone quiet. They had just gone dark, moving under the radar. Setting things up, hoping I wouldn't notice until it was too late. But they had underestimated how much I'd grown used to watching them, and how long I'd been waiting to put distance between us in a way they couldn't claw back from. I escalated everything. A full fraud case was filed. Bank accounts were reviewed. My lawyer filed for a formal cease and desist and began gathering material for a potential civil case. I didn't post anything. I didn't even tell friends until Valerie sent me another message. She'd been contacted by my mom. Please convince Lucas to stop this. He's going to destroy the family. Valerie sent me screenshots. They blamed her for giving me fuel. Said she'd let bitterness become poison. And then the kicker. My mom said if I didn't back off, she'd go to the press. We still have people who listen. That was when I finally realized this wasn't desperation anymore. It was war. But they'd miscalculated again because I hadn't started any of this for revenge. I started it because I wanted out. Now I was going to make sure no one else ended up tied to this kind of mess. And I had more to expose than they ever expected. Because tucked away in an old email thread I hadn't looked at in years, I found something. An old PDF. A scanned contract between my dad and a man named Stuart Caldwell. It had my signature on it, but I had never met Stuart Caldwell. The PDF was buried in an email thread from 2021. I wouldn't have found it if I hadn't searched my name with some old filters I never used anymore. At the time, I was signing a bunch of paperwork to help my dad refinance a work truck loan back when I still believed his stories about trying to rebuild things. The file was titled Service Agreement, 2021 Partnership. I opened it expecting some old document I glanced at once and forgotten. But the signature block at the bottom had my full name and not just typed scan my signature, my initials on every page. But I didn't remember this contract, not even vaguely. The other signature was Stuart Caldwell. I looked him up. He wasn't some random guy. He was the former owner of a real estate investment company that collapsed 2 years ago under suspicion of fraud. A small-time player, but the name was in a few articles. He'd sold off most of his assets and disappeared from public view. But what stopped me cold was one specific article buried in a local paper. Caldwell's former business partner, Marcus Grant, declined to comment. Marcus, my dad. I called my lawyer again and forwarded the PDF. She ran a quick search. It wasn't just a loan contract or some service agreement. It was a partnership registration, an agreement that made it look like I had authorized the use of my financial profile for joint real estate ventures that collapsed months later. The paper trail was murky, but if anyone dug, my name was technically on file as a minor stakeholder. No one had come knocking because the collapse was quiet, internal. But it meant my dad had been forging my name on contracts long before the wedding. And if Caldwell had ever decided to come after someone, he'd have found me. That's when the last piece clicked into place. They didn't just use me for a wedding. They were using me for years, quietly, bit by bit, as leverage, as credit, as a name with clean paper. The wedding just happened to be the first time I noticed. But it wasn't the first time it had happened. So I made a decision. No more hiding behind messages and lawyers and half-blocked accounts. I filed a full police report, not just for the forged contract, not just for the stolen funds, but for years of document misuse, unauthorized cosigns, and signature fraud. Everything we could find. My lawyer attached the file. We sent copies to the banks, the courts, the IRS, anywhere that had touched any of the documents. Then I made one final move. I wrote an email. Short, direct. I sent it to my brother, my mom, my dad, my aunt, and even Amy. Subject: unlisted debts. Body: you wanted to use my name. Now you'll watch it in court. Every document you forged, every account you accessed, and every lie you told will be read into the record. I won't be calling. I won't be replying, but I'll be there. Front row. I didn't hear back for 2 days. Then one reply came in from my brother. Just one sentence. They're trying to pin it all on me. That was the first moment I actually sat down and breathed, because this wasn't just the end of a relationship anymore. It was the beginning of their unraveling. And it hadn't even gone public yet. The police didn't move fast, but they moved. My lawyer told me these things take time. But behind the scenes, the gears started turning slow, heavy, and inevitable. Fraud investigators opened files. Bank representatives requested verification documents. And quietly, without warning, someone from the IRS contacted me. Apparently, someone, likely my father, had filed under my name multiple times over the last few years. Small business write-offs, expenses tied to Grant family enterprises, even income from contracts I'd never touched. At first, they thought I was in on it. But after reviewing the growing stack of evidence, they realized what had really happened. I became a witness, then a complainant, then the quiet center of a much larger mess than anyone had predicted. 3 weeks after I sent that final email, my father was served at work. According to a former friend of his who still followed me on social media under a burner account, weirdly he tried to play it cool when the papers came, said it was a formality, but within 48 hours he had drained his personal account and ghosted everyone. My mother followed 2 days later. I found out she had tried to cash out a joint certificate of deposit that wasn't in her name. Mine actually set up when I was 17. The bank froze the transaction, then called me. Everything unraveled at once. My brother finally snapped. He sent me a long panicked message. Pages of text. He said Dad had left town. Said Mom was saying she didn't understand any of it and that everything was exaggerated. But he also admitted something else. A few months before the wedding, they had used my information to get a small personal loan. He didn't know it had crossed legal lines. Claimed he thought it was pre-approved or something. He begged me to reconsider pressing charges, but I wasn't the one pressing charges anymore. That was out of my hands now. The state picked it up. The tax fraud alone was enough to trigger formal proceedings. The forged documents added weight, and when they looked into the attempted transfer through that fake LLC, the bank gave a full breakdown of how many times they tried using variations of my name, my accounts, even my digital signature. My dad lost his job. Not immediately, but eventually word got around. A quiet firing, no severance. My mother moved in with her sister in Oregon. Last I heard, they weren't speaking anymore either. And my brother, he left town. I don't know where. Valerie told me he messaged her, too. Apologized for everything. Said he didn't expect it to end this way. He left her with a box of old photos and a single envelope that had my name on it. Inside was a check written from one of their old accounts. It bounced. I never deposited it. Just saved the image for the file. People always expect revenge to be loud, explosive, cinematic. But mine wasn't. I didn't scream. I didn't show up to ruin anyone's moment. I just removed my name slowly everywhere they had planted it. Like pulling weeds. The last step was closing the joint account for good. I left exactly $1 inside before shutting it down. No memo, no message, just enough for them to know I had the final word. A few months later, someone emailed me from a real estate office in Florida. They asked if I knew of Marcus Grant trying to use me as a character reference. I said no. That was the last time anyone asked me about my family. And honestly, I hope it stays that way.